There's a kind of exhaustion that sleep does not fix. And if you felt it, you already know what I mean. Not because your life is falling apart, because from the outside, your life may still look completely successful. Your work still works, people still respect you, you still know how to perform at a high level. And yet, something about your life no longer feels completely true. That's the conversation we're having today, because this experience is far more common than people realize, especially among successful people. And most people don't have language for it until they're already deep inside it. Welcome to Your Passion, Purpose, and Personal Brand. I'm Lisa McGuire, and this episode is different because after recording the Identity Evolution series, I realized there was an episode I wish existed before everything else, not after the realization, before it. This episode does help those people recognize themselves before they fully understand what they're feeling. So if you're new here, subscribe now, because this episode is the front door to the entire Identity Evolution series. And if something inside of you has quietly been asking, why doesn't the life I built feel the way I thought it would? You're going to want the rest of the journey. Over time, I started noticing that people usually enter identity evolution through one of three doors. Life no longer fits, work no longer fits, or positioning no longer fits. And each one creates a different kind of identity pressure. When life no longer fits, the question becomes, who am I? What is my purpose? What is all of this actually for? Sometimes this comes through awakening, sometimes grief, sometimes exhaustion, and sometimes success itself. There are people listening to this right now who built the life they thought they were supposed to build and quietly wonder why they still feel disconnected inside of it. They followed the formula: work hard, be responsible, build the life. Be grateful. And eventually, something inside of them whispers, is this all there is? That whisper changes people. Not dramatically at first, quietly. You begin noticing things, the way you move through your day, the conversations that no longer energize you, the strange ache that appears when your life technically works, but your spirit no longer feels fully alive inside it. And sometimes life no longer fits because someone dies. When my father passed away, I remember realizing something that completely altered me internally. I had never lived in this world without my father in it. And the next day, I was someone new, not externally, but internally. Loss changes identity. It forces you to examine who you were before, who you are now, and who you are becoming next. And many people do not realize that grief is often an identity transition. Then there's another doorway. Work no longer fits. And when work no longer fits, the question changes. Now it becomes, who am I? What am I here to do? How do I create value in a way that actually feels meaningful? And this shows up in many forms. The founder who built a groundbreaking business and secretly feels trapped inside of it. The executive whose entire identity was built around being needed, suddenly without a role. The entrepreneur preparing to exit the company they built, 20 years building it, quietly wondering, who am I without this? The person approaching retirement, realizing they planned financially for the future, but never emotionally. And then there's the exhaustion almost nobody talks about. The person making more money than they ever imagined, while privately wondering, where is the happiness I thought this would bring? Because the finish line keeps moving. More money, more visibility, more recognition, and more proof. And underneath all of it is a quieter thought people are often ashamed to admit. Why am I this successful and still fantasizing about running away? That thought shocks people when it appears, but it is far more common than anyone realizes. Some people listening to this have built lives that look perfect from the outside, while internally feeling completely disconnected from them. There is a guilt that comes with that, because you know people would love to have what you have. So when you admit, even privately, that part of you wants to escape it, you judge yourself before anyone else can. You think, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just be grateful? How much more do I need before I finally feel satisfied? Where is the finish line? And eventually, you start realizing something difficult. Your competence became the cage. That's what golden handcuffs actually are. Not success, it's success that became a cage. And then there's another category I think many people quietly suffer through for years. Positioning no longer fits. This is when who the world knows you to be no longer matches who you know yourself to become. And this is especially painful for brilliant people. People whose work has evolved, deepened, expanded. People who have moved far beyond the language that originally built their reputation. Because eventually, you stop wanting to be known for what you do and start wanting to be recognized for how you see. The way you work with people, the insight you bring, the depth of your lived experience, the transformation your work creates. Your clients feel it. They say things like, I could never work with anyone else after this, because what you do cannot be reduced to a commodity. And yet, you still struggle to explain it. Not because it lacks value, because it no longer fits inside of a simple box. And eventually that becomes painful. People still introduce you through who you used to be. They still hire you for the old thing. They still see the earlier version of your work, while internally, you know you have evolved far beyond it. And this creates a strange kind of loneliness, because you can feel your brilliance before language has fully caught up to it. You begin realizing you are no longer exhausted from the work. You are exhausted from being seen too narrowly. There is grief in that. The grief of being known for something true, but no longer complete. And eventually, many people enter another season, directionless. But directionless does not always mean lost. Sometimes it means the old map expired. Directionless can feel embarrassing when you are someone who has always known how to move. You have always been decisive, capable, responsible, the person with the plan. So when you suddenly do not know what comes next, it can feel humiliating, not publicly, privately. You look at your options and think, I should be excited about one of these, but nothing lights up. You try to force clarity. You make lists, you research, you revisit old dreams, you talk to people, and still nothing feels fully alive. That kind of directionless is not laziness. It is not a lack of ambition. It is the grief of standing where the old path ends before the new one has appeared. And if your role is ending, your company is changing, your business is being sold, or retirement is approaching, the question underneath is not only, what do I do next? It is, who am I when no one needs me to be who I was? And eventually all of this begins creating something even deeper, an identity gap. There comes a point where you realize you have spent most of your life becoming who you thought you needed to be. You followed the formula, worked hard, be responsible, be successful, build the life and be grateful, and eventually something inside of you whispers again. Is this all there is? That whisper changes people, because now another identity begins emerging underneath the one everyone recognizes. And for a while you carry both, that self that knows how to perform and the self quietly asking for truth. And that split is exhausting, because part of you still knows how to win inside of the old identity. And another part of you already knows you cannot stay there. You can still do it. You just can't keep being it. And that is where many people become emotionally exhausted, not because they're failing, because they are carrying two identities at once. And eventually, many people reach another threshold, the significance gap. This one has a hollow feeling, not dramatic, it's quiet. You wake up, work, perform, produce, eat dinner, scroll, watch something, go to bed, and you do it again. And somewhere underneath all of this is the question, surely this cannot be the whole point of being alive. But nobody taught people where meaning actually comes from. They were taught achievement, productivity, income, status, not aliveness or truth, resonance, contribution. So now they're successful and starving spiritually. The significance gap is not solved by more achievement. It is answered by meaning, connection, contribution, truth. Most people do not name these emotions. They manage them. They call them burnout, stress, a season, being tired. But the body knows. The body knows when success has become a cage. The body knows when your reputation is too small. The body knows when your direction has expired. The body knows when you are split between who you were and who you are becoming. The body knows when your life is functioning, but not feeding you. And eventually, what you refuse to name will keep getting louder, not to punish you, to return you to yourself. After hearing versions of these stories over and over again, I realized this experience needed a name. I call it successfully stuck. Not because you're failing, because the identity that built your success may no longer be the identity meant to lead your next chapter. And let me say this plainly. Many successful people stay too long, not because they don't know, because they do. But truth changes things. Truth rearranges relationships. Truth threatens belonging. Truth disrupts identities. And high-capacity people are often capable enough to carry this misalignment for years. And that's the trap. If this episode stirred something in you, I created something called Successfully Stuck, the First Truth Kit. Inside of it is a self-diagnostic, reflection prompts, a guided audio from me, the identity evolution map, and suggested next steps based on what you discover. Not as a reinvention plan, as a starting place. You'll find the link to get it in the show notes. So whether you just found this episode or you're coming back to start the series again, listen to each episode independently. Reflect on what it means to you. Notice where you are in the journey. Notice what stage you may be in as you evolve and grow. Straight talk, successfully stuck, identity eclipse, reinvention ridge, the leadership shift, category of only, strategic identity stability, and significance beyond success. Because once you can name where you are, you stop feeling lost inside it. You do not need a breakdown before you are allowed to tell yourself the truth. You do not need your life to completely collapse before you admit something no longer fits. And you do not need to abandon everything you've built to recognize you may be becoming someone new. Sometimes the next chapter begins quietly, with recognition, with honesty, with finally admitting this works, but it no longer feels like me. And if that's where you are, you're not alone. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you here for the next episode.